welcome back to the channel. Well, those of you that saw the video I did on the NSX on the dyno know that I have a misfire problem. So, how to fix that? Well, I have a few problems. And the first reverts back to parts. I checked in with Honda and I was able to get 3 coils only for the front cylinder head. And I'd like to change the coils all at one time. The problem is that I don't know if it's the plugs or the coils. So, or maybe a combination of both. Should I take a gamble? That's probably what I'm gonna have to do. I'm gonna have to gamble that it's just the plugs. Now, I have a whole bunch of plugs that Honda gave to me. They are NGK, I do like them. But I will say that in the X, I run Denso Iridium. Now, for those of you that don't know, Iridium is the best plug. Hands down, it's the way to go. And in this particular case, because I have a misfire, I would probably be better off because they're easier for the coil to fire. So as a band-aid, which I don't recommend, is sometimes if you have a problem, you can get away with using an Iridium plug and she'll still go. Is that the ultimate fix? Absolutely not. But in my particular case, again, not being able to get parts, it's a possibility. But the reality is, what am I gonna do with all these plugs that Honda gave me? Just throw them away? Well, I hate to waste things. So I'm gonna go ahead and run them. And on top of that, really, to fix it right, if the coil's getting weak, you know that I gotta fix the coil, otherwise I'm gonna be down on power. So I started looking around for coils because I couldn't get the rear coils from Honda, which is cylinder 1, 2, and 3. I can't find them anywhere. I can find a whole bunch of aftermarket ones, but I really would like a Honda coil. Unfortunately, since that's not an option, we will go with plan A and just change the spark plugs. And if that doesn't work, well, then you know what plan B is, right? Something else I'll mention is it is blazing hot here today. And I could say it's stone cold in the NSX. For those of you that watched my video a long time ago that I changed the AC compressor in the NSX, I am still a very happy camper. Okay, what you see here is my NSX service bra. Mine is very used. As you can see, it's all dirty. It's gone through at least one timing belt change and a whole lot of work to this car, but it is a lifesaver. If any of you have one, you know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, if you have the means to get your hands on one, it's well worth the money. As far as mid-engine cars go, all of you know I have Lambos, Ferraris, of course, I guess you could say rear-engine Porsche. But the one thing about the NSX is it's tried and true Honda. And what I mean by that is it is by far the easiest car to work on. It is truly a Honda. That's what's so cool about the NSX. So as we jump right in here to do the job, fairly simple. There's a plastic cover there. All you need is a 10mm socket. You can pull the 4 outer bolts, the 2 nuts in the middle. Pull the cover off. And there you can see that there are the 3 coils on the front cylinder head. It's kind of weird. Honda says front and rear. And those house cylinders number 4, 5, and 6. Once you have the cover off, you want to undo the plastic clips for the wiring harness to the coils before you undo the hardware. It's fairly simple, just pull down. You can pull out. I didn't have to use the plastic pry bar that I normally have to use on the European cars. It just came out by hand, which was kind of nice and has a nice retention clip on it. As far as pulling the coils out themselves, again, the 10mm socket. Pull out the 2 bolts and then you can pull the coils out. Once the coil's out, then of course you can start pulling the spark plug and examining what's going on. Now, when it comes to the spark plug, many of you heard me talk about it. I love the snap-on socket. Well worth the money. It's magnetic, makes life a whole lot easier. I'm using heat range 11. For those of you that are interested, Here is the part number. For those of you that don't know why I use heat range 11, it's because I have forced induction, no intercooling system. The colder the plug, the less chance of detonation. So the problem is with the colder plug, it has a tendency to foul earlier, which is potentially what we're seeing here. Now, if any of you have seen any of the videos I've done on changing plugs and coils, such as in the Mercy, I always use anti-seize. Just enough to make sure that nothing happens, that nothing seizes up. Potentially I don't gall any threads. Some people will debate it not to use it because you don't have a good ground for the plug. I prefer it. No matter what, all new plugs, I always check the gap. So I'm gonna check the gap and run 40 thou in the NGK plugs to make sure they're consistent. And just so you know, when I did check all of them, there were two that were much larger than 40 thou. Those of you that have watched any of my videos on changing spark plugs or coils know that I am a firm believer in dielectric grease to try and contain that spark. So what I'll do is put a little bit of that on the coil on plug portion and then go ahead and send everything back in. Now, ordinarily, all you do is tighten down the hardware for the coils, the two bolts using the 10mm socket, hook up the connectors, and put the cover on with the 4 bolts and the 2 nuts. However, in my case, I'm gonna go ahead and leave the cover off. I wanna fire it up and run it because it's just that much less I'll have to deal with if I'm off and I actually have a coil problem. Alright, now that everything's back together on the front side, tackling the rear in my car is just a little bit more difficult since I have other things involved, like the FMU is sitting there. So I need to move that out of the way. If you're not supercharged, chances are you may not have to deal with that. There are 2 bolts holding it down. I'll need to remove those, then move the FMU out of the way so I can access everything the same way as I did on the front. Well, taking a closer look, there just isn't enough room to move that FMU, so what I will do is pull my DC Sports carbon fiber strut tower bar, which I'm sure at the time probably cost me a mint, but I still love how it looks today. Okay, I was able to change the rear plugs. Now, I definitely will say it's a little bit more difficult than the front. Just a few things that might help you. The first thing is, instead of disconnecting the connector first before bolting the coils, I did it actually differently in the rear. I unbolted all the coils so I could lift them up to get my hand in there because it's just too tight between the valve cover and the coil to get to the tab and pull the plug. I'll mention this, be careful of these. I had to chase one of these. These are the stands that sit on the valve cover that protect the coil covers. They're loose, so when you lift the coils up, if you don't remove those first, they fall and get caught in many various places that you don't want them to be. Now, of course, all that's done, I'm ready to put the coils back in. So I will use my dielectric grease, set it up, and we'll see what happens. All right, well, there you have it. The NSX fired up, everything sounds clean here in the shop. It was developing the Misfire even at idle, so I'm optimistic that maybe I'm okay. Of course, I'm going to still order those coils because they're so hard to get a hold of, but ultimately, the true test is taken out for a spin. The first thing I notice as I look at these plugs is cylinder 1, 2, and 3, which is the rear cylinder head, is running a bit more rich. 4, 5, and 6 on the front side seem to be a little more lean. Now, to me, the spark plug is the most important key, because it's what's happening in the cylinder. Now, many will argue EGTs, air fuel meters, yes, all important, I agree. But the bottom line is, This is where it's actually taking place and will give you the best information in my opinion. So as far as cylinders 1, 2, and 3 being rich, not too much of a problem. Leaner on the back side is still not extremely lean. I don't see intense amounts of heat back there. There are some problems though. Cylinder number 4, what I will say is I'm starting to see a hint of detonation. And that is definitely alarming. It's very, very minimal. So does it really matter in the big picture? Well, of course, all detonation matters. But again, what I'm hindered by is not having standalone engine management. So one thing you always have to take and consider, especially in forced induction, air distribution. It's never perfect. I don't care what anybody says. The bottom line is, the way the intake manifold works, everyone hopes that you get equal air distribution. It just doesn't work that way. And a good indication is that we see that the front cylinder head is running leaner. Okay? If it was an individual problem, like let's say an injector or even the entire fuel system with the pump, we'd see a uniform move. But what we're doing is we're seeing one bank. Well, most likely it's an air distribution issue, in my opinion. Now, as far as detonation for all of you, it's difficult because obviously if I had standalone engine management, the key would be either pulling some timing out of those cylinders or adding some fuel. And in all honesty, if you want my take on it, the best thing would be take cylinders 1, 2, and 3 and trim back about 2% fuel. Leave the fuel the same here and maybe pull about 1 degree of timing out of 4, 5, and 6. I don't have that option. If you do, you're set, okay? But what I will tell you is there's many other ways to address these things, okay? First of all, what you could do is, if it's one specific cylinder, like number 4, I will get my injectors flowed, okay, to make sure that that injector is performing properly. If you wanted to do the more affordable way, you could take a injector off a cylinder that also, number 6, seems to be running on the leaner side, swap, and see if the problem goes that way. That's just a whole lot of work. I mean, for me, honestly, I'd be better off just sending this injector in because I didn't have this problem last time I changed plugs, which makes me think I may potentially have an injector that's starting to clog a bit, which would be number 4. So cleaning that would take the problem. RC Engineering is the best. They do all my cars, my race cars, and to be honest with you, if you're gonna send them in, I would just send all 6 in. But we can start with that and go from there. I like to do things all at once, and seeing that Honda only sent me 3 coils for the front, didn't have the rears, I was just gonna hold off and see if I got lucky. As all of you heard, the NSX fired and sounded pretty good. The only problem is I can still hear a slight hint of a misfire. Now, going back to the plugs, of course, and referencing, I don't see a specific cylinder that would be causing that problem. So unfortunately, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and change the front coils. And I'm hoping that I can get the rears. In fact, since they're on back order with Honda, I'm now searching over the internet to buy them wherever I have to try and get them in because I like to change them all at the same time or as close as possible. But since I have the 3, I'll change those and hopefully it'll go away. I think somebody pointed out that I'm the world's greatest neighbor because I go through all these back roads with my cars and the exhaust note's very high. But keep in mind, I go very slow. I just use a very low gear. It's all done with editing. I know it shouldn't matter, but just the fact that I know that this car is under 3,000 pounds just makes me feel a whole lot better about it. As you can see right here, when it pulls out, and it goes, not bad. Pulls good. Well, I don't know about you, but I don't hear a misfire there. Even with the sun beaming down on this car, and some pretty good heat coming through the intake, still no misfire. Well, there you saw it. Made the plug change. Initially I thought things were good, kind of the story of my life. Then of course, things not so good. What did this turn into? A situation much like the Mercy, the G. I mean, you could possibly say that I'm the king of misfires lately. It's just non-stop. And this being no exception, I took the gamble, then changed the coils. That ended up being no good. Although everything does seem cleaned up. But for sure, I need to change those rear coils. And since I can't get them from Honda, God, I am dreading that I may just put some aftermarket ones in and put the Honda ones on back order. I don't know if any of you know how this works that have NSXs, but the reason why people can wait years to get things like cylinder heads, body panels is you have to stick it on back order, okay? And what Honda does, they wait till they have enough and then make the run. So if you have a whole bunch of people needing cylinder heads, they'll run it much sooner. But what are the odds of that happening? It's rare, although a friend of mine, it did happen to, and it took a very long time. Now here we are, this situation. Well, does everything seem cleaned up? It seems tight now, and I'm happy about that. But of course, it could be short-lived. Now, for those of you that have the same type of problems that I have getting parts, what I will say is this. I'll tell you a few ways you can get around it. I wouldn't recommend it, but it is a way. Okay, so if you can't get coils especially, you can put in new plugs and try it. Or, if you want to just gap them down, okay? Because the coil, of course, driving the spark, the larger the gap, the harder it is to fire. So it's a Band-Aid, but at least you're driving around without a misfire, okay? Now, are you going to make optimal power? Of course not, because your spark is much smaller. And of course, that ignites the air-fuel mixture. But it would make to get you around the corner. So for instance, I believe these came in gapped at 40 thou. I would try going at 30 thou, give it a shot. I mean, you could go tighter, and that would keep you going till hopefully your coils came off back order, and you'd be set to go. But at least that's all I have for you. Other than that, I mean, you go aftermarket, and that's an option. But you know, do any of us really want to do that? Not really. I mean, the coils I think are only around $100. I mean, the work itself to redo just isn't worth it. Other than that, I think everything's solid. As you can hear, we're sounding good, no problems. Again, I'm a happy camper. However, I'm still looking for those coils, which I'll have to deal with. Well, all would seem very good, and in fact, since it is very hot today, you would think if she was going to do it, she'd do it now. So I guess it was well worth all the effort. Well, other than that, all is good. For me now, it's time to go pick up Drew, because for those of you that don't know, the NSX is her favorite car. She loves this car more than the Lambos or Ferraris. As you know, for me, it's a Mercier SV. But whatever ensures that Drew is happy, which makes me happy, I'm all good with. Have a great weekend. See you next time.